Welcome. I'm Doug Morgan, and you're listening to Uncommon Sense, where we hunt for the truth in the topics you're not supposed to talk about, Christianity and politics. I shared recently on this very podcast that I was not allowed to be a foster parent to needy children because I believe spanking as one form of acceptable punishment. I didn't like to spank children. I still don't when they do something wrong, but because I love them and have their best in mind, I am required to do it in a loving way. Too often, what is best for the children is lost in our social debates on ideology. And there has been a number of stories lately about gay adoption and even surrogacy. And from an opinion piece by Matt Walsh, he says, you can tell a lot about the strength of a particular argument or worldview by how long it lasts before reality ends up discrediting it. There are some debates that don't need to be settled by consulting with dozens of experts or asking 10 different AI models and then comparing the notes. Instead, certain events take place and they resolve the disagreement right away. A catastrophic nuclear meltdown ended any discussion about how effective Chernobyl's emergency shutdown mechanism was, for instance. An iceberg convinced everyone that despite all of the marketing hype, the Titanic could in fact sink. There are limits to the ability of liars to and charlatans to deceive the population, in other words. And even the most convincing fraudsters face the risk of exposure if their deception is simply too absurd to be compatible with reality. The more absurd the deception is, the faster it falls apart. It all began on Sunday when an Irish political activist named Derek Blythe discovered some videos that had been posted on a gay couple's social media feed. The videos show the two gay men, both of whom are overweight, making monthly anniversaries with a child they've obtained. And in every video, they blow out a candle on the cupcake. And the videos keep going as the men seem to somehow get fatter each time. But in response to these videos on Sunday, Derek Bly posted simply, quote, "Unless a miracle happens, this child has almost no chance at a normal life," unquote. And he was right, of course. At the visceral level, this footage is just simply repulsive. Everyone understands that. Whether they'll admit to it or not, well, that can be two things. But when a child is deprived of his mother and father, it isn't something to celebrate. It's a tragedy that's inflicted on someone who cannot possibly deserve it and who may never recover from it. And that's especially true when, in lieu of a mother and a father, a child is obtained by two men who belong to a demographic whose behavior in very disproportionate numbers of cases is completely incompatible with raising children, to put things as mildly as possible. It's also a demographic that's disproportionately interested in adopting male children. And again, everyone understands what's going on there, though nobody will say it. And yet, when they made this simple and straightforward observation, hundreds of thousands of left-wing activists pretended to be shocked and horrified by what he had written. They almost claimed that, in fact, it's better for the child to be raised by two gay men. And than by their own mother and father. There's one representative post, and this is it, which has more than 6 million views and 220,000 likes on X. Makes me happy. The baby is going to be raised not to hate people and will be loved, is the post. Here's another post from someone named Bev Jackson, okay, of a group called Alliance LGB. This came in response to Derek's post expressing disgust at the footage. It said this: "That is homophobic. If the child has two loving male parents, there is no evidence whatsoever that he or she will not prosper." But Bev Jackson's response didn't last very long. Just a few hours later, Bev deleted it. And a lot of people, like Bev, deleted their reactions too. And that's because in record-breaking time, the narrative took an extremely dark turn. The journalists at Redux decided to take a closer look at the two gay men in the video with the toddler, and here's what they found. A widely circulated video showcasing a gay couple's surrogacy journey has revealed that a baby boy is currently in the custody of a registered child sex offender. Brandon Keith Mitchell is a Tier 1 sex offender in the state of Pennsylvania and was arrested in 2016 after attempting to solicit a 16-year-old boy for sexual abuse. The victim in the case was a student at Downingtown West High School, where Mitchell had worked as a chemistry teacher, and he was 30 years old at the time. According to local news reports, Mitchell was, quote, charged with texting obscene images and texts to a student and asking for nude images of the underage student. Well, Mitchell taught at this school from 2010 to 2015, and during this period, he reportedly sent more than 12,000 text messages to the student. He ended up pleading guilty to felony child pornography possession and one count of corruption of minors because police found sexually explicit videos of the child on his personal computer and was sentenced to nearly 2 years of incarceration. But he didn't serve anywhere near that sentence. Just 2 months after his incarceration, Redux reports, he was granted parole for a crime that should have resulted in life imprisonment at a minimum, and he barely spent any time in jail. The Redux article continues by saying part of his conditions included that he have no unsupervised contact with minors and that he surrender his teaching license. He quickly moved on to obtain a job as a chemist at Eurofin's biopharma product testing in Lancaster, where he has worked for the past 9 years. And in 2021, Mitchell married Logan Riley, a second grade teacher from Maryland, and moved to Seven Valleys, Pennsylvania. In 2023, the two launched a GoFundMe to raise money for a surrogate. Of course, the GoFundMe didn't mention the whole convicted sex offender thing. In any event, the fundraiser has since been taken down, but it reportedly had a goal of $50,000 and raised just over $2,000. So it wasn't exactly a success. But nevertheless, Riley, the husband of the convicted sex offender, reported that in November of 2023, they had found a surrogate. Our surrogate went through extensive medical and social work evaluations in order to be approved for surrogacy. Once approved, the lengthy legal and financial process began. We are so excited that our amazing surrogate will carry one of our embryos for us, helping to expand our family. It's hard to miss the irony here, actually. According to these two gay men, there was an extensive, as they put it, screening process for their surrogate, meaning the woman whose body they were going to rent, so that she would bear a child for them, so that they could pretend to be parents. Social workers, doctors, and lawyers were all involved, and yet, evidently, there was no screening process whatsoever for these two gay men. No one in the federal government or the state of Pennsylvania saw any problem with creating a new human life for the sole purpose of handing the child off to a convicted sexual predator. And not just any convicted sexual predator. We're talking about a convicted sexual predator who specifically preyed on a young child. At first, you might think, well, there must have been some massive, very unfortunate mistake here. Surely, you'd assume there must be a thorough vetting process for the children, the parents of children who are born through surrogacy. And somehow, in this particular case, someone must have fallen asleep on the job. Maybe they ran a criminal records check under the wrong name or something like that. But that's not remotely what happened. As it turns out, there is no legal bar in the state of Pennsylvania or many other states for convicted sexual predators to obtain children through surrogacy. It's completely legal. There are no roadblocks whatsoever. Again, this is from Redox. They said Redox reached out to the division, Pennsylvania State Police, responsible for maintaining Mitchell's registration, and was informed that the state does not automatically forbid individuals convicted of sex crimes from having children and gaining custody or exercising parental rights. While Pennsylvania's adoption law does prohibit sex offenders from adopting or fostering children, gestational surrogacy circumvents any such laws through pre-birth, parentage orders. You heard that correctly. Individuals who are convicted of sex crimes, including sex crimes involving children, crimes so severe that the guilty party had to agree to have no unsupervised contact with minors for a certain period of time, are allowed to obtain children in Pennsylvania. The only restriction is that, indeed, of adopting a child, they have to pay for a woman to give birth to a child. This is a policy that's so incomprehensible and so evil that it's hard to even talk about. And it's also a policy that evidently a lot of officials in Pennsylvania aren't even aware of. One of Redox's writers posted this on social media as she was working on this story. It says, while I was talking to the state police sex offender division, the agency actually stopped for a moment when I mentioned it was a surrogate baby and said, but surely there's a vetting process of this kind of thing. Well, actually, no. There's no vetting process for this kind of thing, as it turns out. If someone is a pedophile in the state of Pennsylvania and they've been convicted for corrupting minors and possessing child pornography, they are still completely free to obtain a child through surrogacy. And not just any child, a newborn with no known relatives, no next of kin to check on him. And then, once they have this defenseless child in their home, he is entirely at the mercy and is helpless. And no one can see what they're doing. And there is no one who actually knows the child or cares for him. Even his mother isn't allowed to speak to him. It's almost as if the state went out of its way to create a loophole for pedophiles. There are no words for how dark this is. And by the way, This is one of many fundamental fatal problems with relying on statistics and experts to tell you that gay adoption is completely fine and appropriate. Every single mainstream expert will tell you that gay men are just as capable as straight couples to raise children, if not more so. They'll tell you to suspend all of your intuitions and common sense, and they'll call you a bigot if you disagree. But the truth is, none of these experts actually know what goes on inside these households where men are raising children that aren't theirs. None of the statistics can capture the reality of what's happening, because only the parents who are caught abusing their children will actually be reflected in those statistics. That's why we have intuition and basic morality. And it's why we should always pay close attention whenever activists on the other side, in a demonic kind of rage, attempt to claim the moral high ground, only for it to crumble immediately in a matter of days, or hours in this case. There are some lies that are simply too evil and unsustainable to survive contact with reality. The fiction that gay men are appropriate foster parents for other people's children is one of them. And in recent months, we've repeatedly seen glimpses into the horrors that many of these children are enduring behind closed doors. The recent case of William and Zachary Zurlock in Georgia is an example of two men who were sexually abusing their two adopted children. They probably would never have been caught if they hadn't bragged about it and their behavior to others. Especially in light of stories like this, it shouldn't be remotely controversial to say that the safety of children is infinitely more important than any gay man's desire to become parent. Nature has already decided that gay couples will be childless by definition. The law should follow suit, starting with the state of Pennsylvania, which should immediately change its law and remove this particular child from this household. This very straightforward principle needs to become law. Any society that doesn't protect its own children does not deserve to exist. Under this guise of helping children, a system has been created that allows for children to be abused in the most horrific ways imaginable. The system must be dismantled. The abusers should go to prison for the rest of their lives. And no child, no matter the circumstances, should ever be forcibly prevented from having a mother and a father ever again in this country. And the Georgia case that he's referring to here happened last year. In fact, from Fox News from December of last year, it says Zachary and William Zulock, I guess, were sentenced to 100 years in prison without the possibility of parole following their guilty pleas to multiple counts of aggravated child abuse and exploitation, according to the District Attorney Randy McGinley, the Alcovy Judicial Circuit Judge, attorney. Sorry. The sentencing hearing took place on December 19th of last year before Judge Jeffrey L. Foster. William Zulock pleaded guilty in August to 6 counts of aggravated sodomy, 3 counts of aggravated child molestation, 2 counts of incest, and 1 count of sexually exploitation of children. Zachary Zulock entered guilty pleas in October to 2 counts of aggravated sodomy, 3 counts of aggravated child molestation, 2 counts of incest, 2 counts of sodomy, 3 counts of sexual exploitation of children, and 2 counts of pandering for a person under 18. Well, the case began in July of 2022 when the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, the GBI, they received a tip from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children regarding suspected child sexual abuse material. They call that CSAM. and it was uploaded from a Walton County IP address. And investigators traced the materials to the Zulauk residence, where they discovered evidence of extensive abuse. The Zulaks, who had adopted 2 boys years earlier, admitted during interviews to abusing the children. Authorities seized over 7 terabytes of electronic evidence, including surveillance footage and cell phone records documenting the abuse. Investigators also uncovered graphic texts and social media messages discussing the crimes. Co-defendants in the case included Hunter Lawless, who pleaded guilty to sexual exploitation of children, and Luis Vizario Sanchez, who was convicted of pandering and unrelated computer theft charges. District Attorney Randy McGinley praised the efforts of law enforcement and protection teams for their commitment to securing the justice for the victims. McGinley also commented the resilience of the victims, noting their inspiring strength throughout the investigation and the prosecution process. So you may be saying to yourself, these are just a few bad actors, right? Why should same-sex couples be able to, or why shouldn't they be able to adopt or buy a child? Well, Carlo Broussard writes for Catholic Answers, and Carlo says that there are many reasons that we could give, such as how studies show that same-sex relationships have negative effects on children. But suffice it to say, the fundamental reason is that it presents the adopted child with a false view of human sexual relationships. It teaches a child that it's okay to have romantic relationships with members of the same sex. But such relationships are contrary to our human good. Consequently, it does grave harm to children to bring them up in an environment where such relationships are promoted as a moral good, rather than providing the child with proper human formation, which is the duty of every parent, whether biological or adoptive. It provides malinformation. Well, this might sound unjust to some, but it's unjust only if same-sexual relationships are morally good. In that case, there would be nothing wrong in principle with a same-sex couple adopting and raising a child. And to oppose a same-sex couple from adopting a child would be unjust. But such relationships are not morally good. Therefore, there is no way in principle that it could be good for a same-sex couple to adopt a child. To oppose a same-sex couple adopting a child is no more of an injustice than it is to oppose a couple that has had a history of abusing children. We must look out for the well-being of children, and since an environment where same-sex romantic relationships are promoted as good is not ordered to the well-being of the child, and it ought to be avoided. And I would agree with this. Again, if you don't see it as immoral, then you have nothing to stand on. But isn't that why we have the Bible as our standard? So we know what is moral and what is not. But I also wanted to bring to you an opinion from someone who was raised in a gay household, and I don't think she was that she's a Christian, but I think her perspective is really interesting here. And she wrote an opinion piece. Her name is Samantha Weezing, and she wrote an opinion piece for the Tennessean. And she said this. She said, legislation against homosexual adoptions sound unfair only if we are looking at it from the adult's perspective. When we view adoption from the child's perspective, Prioritizing homes with both mother and fathers not only makes sense, it's critically important. For the first 8 years of my life, she says, I was raised by two gay men, my father and his partner. My formative years were almost entirely devoid of women. I didn't even know that there was such a thing as a mother until I watched The Land Before Time at school. My 5-year-old brain could not understand why I didn't have a mom that I suddenly desperately wanted. I felt the loss. I felt the hole. As I grew, I tried to fill the hole with aunts and my dad's lesbian friends and teachers. I remember asking my first grade teacher if I could call her mom. I asked that question of any woman who showed me any amount of love and affection. It was instinctive. I craved a mother's love, even though I was well loved by my two gay dads. And why is that? Because gender matters in parenting. And because gender matters in parenting, that means gender matters when placing children for adoption. I have personally experienced the pain that motherlessness causes. I could never support any law or institution that endorses motherlessness. Many psychologists agree that fatherlessness is a scourge on our society. Why would anyone think that, purposefully depriving a child of the love of a mother or father is a good thing? When it comes to legislation on adoption, we need to be clear about who adoption is for. In adoption, the child is the client. Adoption is not about giving children to adults who want them. It's about finding the best home for children who have lost their parents. When adoption is done right, every child will be placed in a loving home, but not every adult who wants a child will get one. Next, we must recognize that for the child, adoption begins with loss. Even if they are placed with their adoptive parents at birth, adoptees suffer traumas as a result of being separated from their biological parents. As an adoptee who knows several other adoptees, I can tell you that it's a trauma that affects children for life. The adoption agency's job is to find a family that is best positioned to shepherd their child through her loss and trauma. There are multiple factors in that calculation, from a couple's finances to background checks to readiness to parent the child's special needs to relational stability, etc. But make no mistake, the presence of a father and a mother should be a factor in every agency's calculation. I know what I'm about to say is unpopular, but it's true nonetheless. Men cannot be mothers, and women cannot be fathers. Kids need both. The well-established difference between mothering and fathering reveals that men and women offer distinct and complementary benefits to children, from the ways that they play, to the ways that they talk, to how they discipline, to how they prepare children for the world. Male and female specific parenting optimizes child development. Agencies that recognize and prioritize homes where children will receive maternal and parental love should be praised, not demonized. To say that the biological sex of the parents is irrelevant is based in ideology, not reality. I am also not saying that just because you are a married man and woman, you are automatically qualified to adopt. Plenty of heterosexual couples will not make the cut. No adult, gay or straight, has a right to adopt. Rather, children who have lost their parents have a right to be adopted. And whenever possible, they should be adopted by a mom and a dad. People care about children, especially those who need parents. We need to let adoption agencies find homes that give traumatized children the best chance at a healthy and happy life. And whenever possible, that will be the home of a married mom and dad. Don't be intimidated by cries of discrimination when it comes to adoption. It is not discrimination to stand up for a child's right to be loved by both a mother and a father. And I would agree with that. I had to share that with you. I really think it hit the point. The cries that homosexual parenting is just as good or even better is just not true. It's just not reality. I would love to hear from you on it. You probably have some opinions here, and I would love to hear those. Of course, you can always do that at uncommonsensepodcast.com. You can also go to our YouTube page now, and you can subscribe, like, share. We would love that. Always helps. And thank you for listening. This podcast is a production of Morganite Communications.